I am Gabriella Wilson, 69 years old, and until recently, the proud owner of a $2.7 billion tech empire based in New Jersey. My late husband and I built everything from nothing, and I thought my son Thomas would be my legacy. Then I met his wife Amanda. The boat trip was her idea. When she whispered, "Say hello to the river," and shoved me overboard, my own son just watched and smiled. I never imagined my family would try to kill me for money. They thought I was gone forever. They were wrong. If you're watching from somewhere safe where family still means something, hit like and subscribe as I reveal how I turned the tables on those who thought I was just another disposable old woman. I was born in a small apartment in Hoboken, the daughter of a factory worker and a seamstress. We never had much, but my parents taught me the value of hard work and integrity. I put myself through Rutgers University, waiting tables at night, and that's where I met Harold. He was brilliant studying computer engineering when most people still thought computers were the size of rooms. We fell in love over late-night study sessions and dreams, bigger than our bank accounts. Harold had this vision about personal computing that seemed impossible in the 70s, but we believed. We started Wilson Tech in our garage with $5,000 borrowed from my reluctant parents. The first decade was brutal. 80-hour work weeks, ramen noodle dinners, and a tiny apartment where we built prototypes and drafted business plans. Our kitchen table doubled as our conference room when we pitched to our first investors. Our breakthrough came with a data storage system Harold designed that was years ahead of anything on the market. Suddenly we were expanding, hiring teams, moving into real offices. Through the tech boom of the 90s, Wilson Tech became one of the leading companies in data security. We went public in 1997, and overnight our net worth jumped to the millions. By the time we hit our 60s, Forbes valued the company at $2.7 billion. Thomas came along when we were both 35 after years of trying. Our miracle baby. Despite our growing business, I made sure to be present for him. Harold coached his little league teams, and I never missed a school play or science fair. We lived comfortably but tried to keep him grounded. Private school, yes, but he still had chores and summer jobs. We wanted him to understand that wealth was a responsibility, not just a privilege. As Thomas grew up, he showed little interest in technology or business. He was more artistic, preferring photography and creative writing. Harold was disappointed, though he tried not to show it. I encouraged Thomas to follow his own path, funding his film degree at NYU and his early photography exhibitions. But the truth was, Thomas seemed to lack drive. His projects would start with enthusiasm, but fizzle out when they required sustained effort. He bounced between careers through his 20s and early 30s, always with our financial support. 3 years ago, Harold was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. We had built this empire together, worked side by side for 40 years, and suddenly I was watching my partner fade away. The last coherent thing he said to me was, "Take care of Thomas, but don't let him take advantage of your kindness." I didn't fully understand what he meant until it was too late. After Harold's death, I found myself alone in our 12,000 square foot home in Princeton. As the sole heir to everything we'd built, I took Harold's seat as CEO, determined to honor his legacy. Thomas sent flowers to the funeral, but left early for a photography assignment in Europe. He seemed more relieved than grieving. His calls became infrequent, his visits rare. Then suddenly, 6 months after Harold's funeral, Thomas called with exciting news. He had met someone special at a charity gala in Manhattan. Her name was Amanda Devereaux, a 32-year-old event planner with connections throughout New York society. Their romance was a whirlwind, and within 3 months, Thomas brought her home to meet me. Amanda was stunning, with perfectly highlighted hair, impeccable fashion sense, and a dazzling smile. She charmed me with stories of her charity work and her admiration for what Harold and I had built. She asked thoughtful questions about the company and seemed genuinely interested in our family history. For the first time since Harold died, I felt a spark of hope. Thomas seemed happier and more focused than I'd seen him in years. "Mom, Amanda has helped me find direction," he told me over dinner that first night. "I'm thinking about joining the company, learning the business like Dad always wanted." I was thrilled. Perhaps this relationship was exactly what Thomas needed. When they announced their engagement just 2 months later, I insisted on paying for the wedding. 250 guests at the Plaza Hotel, a designer gown for Amanda, a 5-tier cake and rare orchids flown in from Thailand. No expense was spared. Looking back, I should have noticed how Amanda's eyes lingered on the jewelry I wore to the reception, or how she casually mentioned expanding Thomas's role at Wilson Tech during their honeymoon in Bali. After their wedding, Thomas and Amanda bought a penthouse in Manhattan with a loan from me. Thomas took a vice president position at Wilson Tech, though he rarely made it to the office before 10 and left by 3. Amanda quit her job to focus on supporting Thomas's career and their social life. Their Instagram showed a constant stream of exclusive restaurants' front-row seats at Hamilton weekends in the Hamptons. The money flowed out as quickly as I provided it. My big empty house felt even emptier with Harold gone. When Thomas mentioned they were considering moving to be closer to the Wilson Tech headquarters, I suggested they move in with me instead. "This place is too big for just one person," I said. "And it would be wonderful to have family around again." Amanda hesitated, but Thomas seemed relieved. I later realized it was because their penthouse had been mortgaged to the hilt to support their lifestyle. Moving in with me meant no housing expenses and access to my household staff. At the time, I was simply happy not to be alone anymore. The first few months were lovely. We had family dinners in the dining room that had sat empty for too long. Amanda redecorated one of the sitting rooms into a beautiful office space for herself, claiming she was planning to start an exclusive event planning business. Thomas seemed to be taking more interest in the company, occasionally asking questions about board decisions and financial reports. I felt hopeful about this new chapter. After decades of putting the company first, I was finally focusing on family. I had no idea that the people I welcomed into my home were already plotting to take everything from me. The changes were subtle at first. Thomas began missing our family dinners, texting last-minute excuses about meetings running late, though I knew for a fact he'd left the office hours earlier. When he was home, he was constantly on his phone, barely engaging in conversation. Amanda suggested we scale back dinners to once a week, claiming they needed couple time to build their marriage. "You understand, don't you, Gabriella?" Amanda said, having dropped Mom after the first month. "Marriage takes work, especially in the early years." I did understand perhaps too well. I gave them space, retreating to my rooms in the evenings with a book and a glass of wine. The house felt strangely quiet despite having 3 people in it. My footsteps echoed in hallways that seemed to grow longer each day. Then came the subtle criticisms. Amanda would touch the antique furniture Harold and I had collected over the years and make a face. "Have you ever thought about updating the decor, Gabriella? These pieces are so dated." Or she would glance at my comfortable slacks and sweaters with a slight grimace. "We should take you shopping for some new clothes. Something more youthful." I found myself changing my appearance to please her, ordering new furniture for the common areas, feeling like a guest in my own home. Still, I told myself this was part of building a relationship with my new daughter-in-law. Compromise was necessary. One evening I was reading in the library when I overheard Amanda on the phone in the adjacent room. She hadn't closed the door completely, and her voice carried clearly. "I know, Jen, it's taking forever. The old lady is healthy as a horse despite her age. We could be waiting years for the inheritance. Thomas is working on getting more control at the company, but she's still making all the major decisions." A pause. "Don't worry, we have plans. One way or another we'll get what's coming to us." I sat frozen book forgotten in my lap. Surely I had misunderstood. But the seed of doubt was planted and I couldn't uproot it. The next weekend, Thomas and Amanda hosted a lavish party at the mansion. 60 guests filled our home, drinking expensive champagne and eating catered hors d'oeuvres. I wasn't formally invited but assumed my presence was expected. I dressed carefully in a new outfit Amanda had approved of and made my way downstairs. As I entered, the main living room conversation momentarily halted. Amanda's smile tightened. "Gabriella, we didn't expect you to join. Aren't these parties a bit much for you? You're always saying how you prefer quiet evenings." "It's my home, Amanda. I thought I'd socialize a bit." "Of course, everyone. This is Thomas's mother. Not our hostess or even my name. Just Thomas's mother, as if I were an afterthought in my own house." Throughout the evening, I was politely but firmly sidelined, introduced as an elderly relative rather than the woman who owned the mansion and the company that paid for their lifestyle. The next morning, while Thomas and Amanda slept off their hangover, I went into their wing of the house. I had never invaded their privacy before, but something drove me to Thomas's home office. In his desk drawer beneath golf scorecards and receipts, I found financial statements showing massive debt, credit card bills for hundreds of thousands of dollars, a second mortgage on their Manhattan penthouse that was 3 months behind on payments, notifications from exclusive clubs about past due membership fees. When Thomas finally emerged around noon, I confronted him with the evidence. "What were you doing going through my personal papers?" he demanded, his face flushing. "Thomas, you're drowning in debt. Why didn't you come to me? I could have helped." "I don't need your help. I have everything under control." His voice had a hard edge I'd never heard before. "These statements suggest otherwise. And why is your name on accounts for the Cayman Islands? The company doesn't have any operations there." He snatched the papers from my hand. "It's none of your business. I'm a vice president now, not a child. I have investment strategies you wouldn't understand." After that confrontation, Thomas began asking for loans for increasingly vague business opportunities. $50,000 for a startup investment, $200,000 for a property development, $500,000 for a tech venture that needed silent partners. I transferred the money, hoping each investment might spark genuine interest in business, but I never saw any returns or documentation. Amanda began suggesting that the master suite was wasted on just me. "You hardly use the sitting room, or the extra closets," she pointed out. "Thomas and I could really use the space, and the guest house would be perfect for you, so cozy and manageable for someone your age." The guest house was indeed lovely, but it was the principle. They wanted to relegate me to the periphery of my own property. I refused firmly, and Amanda's perfect smile never quite reached her eyes afterward. My longtime housekeeper, Eleanor, who had been with us for 20 years, came to me in tears one morning. "Mrs. Wilson, I've been let go. Mrs. Amanda said my services are no longer required and that the severance check would arrive by mail." "That's impossible. Eleanor, you work for me, not for Amanda." "That's what I said, ma'am." But Mr. Thomas backed her up, said they're modernizing the household staff. One by one, my loyal staff was replaced by Amanda's choices. The new housekeeper rearranged my belongings without permission. The new chef prepared meals I found difficult to digest. The new gardener dug up Harold's prized rose garden to install a meditation space Amanda never used. For my 69th birthday, I had hoped for a quiet dinner with Thomas and Amanda. Instead, they organized another large party with their friends, people who barely knew me. Thomas and Amanda arrived an hour late to the dinner. Preceding the party, checked their phones throughout the meal and left early to greet their arriving guests. I sat alone at the head of the table, an untouched slice of cake before me, listening to the laughter from the next room. That night I cried for the first time since Harold's funeral. I was becoming a stranger in my own life, invisible, in my own home. The disappointment was evolving into something darker, a suspicion I couldn't quite name, but felt growing stronger by the day. I've taken medication for mild hypertension since my 60s. Nothing serious, just a daily tablet with breakfast. One morning I noticed the pill looked slightly different. The color was a bit off, the texture changed. I dismissed it as a generic substitution by the pharmacy and took it anyway. Within an hour, I felt strangely dizzy. The room tilted and swayed as I tried to stand. I gripped the edge of my desk, my heart racing unnaturally fast. By afternoon, the symptoms had mostly passed, but a nagging worry remained. The episodes began to occur more frequently. Confusion that left me disoriented in my own home. Memory lapses, where I'd find myself in a room with no recollection of why I'd gone there. Extreme fatigue that would hit suddenly, forcing me to lie down wherever I was. Once I fell asleep during a board meeting, something that had never happened in my 40 years of business. Maria, the only original staff member who had survived Amanda's purge by keeping a low profile, came to my room one evening after Thomas and Amanda had gone out. "Mrs. Wilson, I need to speak with you privately," she whispered, glancing nervously at the door. "I've been seeing things that worry me. Mrs. Amanda goes into your bathroom when you're not here. She opens your medicine cabinet. And when Mr. Thomas asks where you are, she sometimes says, 'Hopefully dying quietly somewhere.'" I wanted to dismiss Maria's concerns as exaggeration or misunderstanding, but the earnest worry in her eyes stopped me. "Thank you for telling me, Maria. Please keep this between us." That night I couldn't sleep. The large house I'd once found so comforting now seemed full of shadows and threats. Was it possible? Could my own son and his wife be trying to harm me? The thought was so monstrous I could barely entertain it. The next day I called a security company and had discreet cameras installed in the common areas of the house while Thomas and Amanda were at a charity luncheon. Small, nearly invisible devices that streamed to a secure server I could access from my tablet. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the footage would reassure me and put my suspicions to rest. Instead, what I saw chilled me to the bone. Thomas and Amanda in the kitchen late at night, speaking in low voices. "The doctor says she's surprisingly healthy for her age. It could take years," Thomas complained, pouring a generous whiskey. "Not if we help things along," Amanda replied, her perfect smile now predatory. "The adjustments to her medication should start showing more effects soon. Dr. Reynolds says it's perfectly plausible for someone her age to have a stroke or heart attack." "We need to accelerate the timeline," Thomas insisted. "The Cayman accounts aren't going to hide the money forever, and the board is asking questions about those transfers." "Patience, darling. The changes to her will are almost complete. We just need Jackson to finalize the paperwork, and then we can move forward more aggressively." Jackson. My heart sank. Jackson Porter had been our family lawyer and my friend for 30 years. Had they corrupted him too? I called Jackson the next morning from my car, away from the house and potential listening ears. "Gabriella, I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Your assistant keeps saying you're unavailable." I didn't have an assistant anymore. "Jackson, have you been making changes to my will?" A pause. "I was going to call you about that. Thomas brought paperwork he claimed you had approved transferring majority control of Wilson Tech to him immediately rather than after your death as originally planned. It had your signature, but something felt off. I've been stalling him." "That wasn't my signature, Jackson, and I never approved any changes." His sharp intake of breath told me everything. "I'll need to see you in person, Gabriella. Not at your house. Meet me at the office downtown." Jackson showed me the documents Thomas had tried to submit. The signature was a good forgery, but missing the slight upward slant on the final "ah" that I always use. We discovered Thomas had been forging my signature on company documents for months, authorizing transfers to obscure subsidiaries and signing off on contracts I'd never seen. "This is criminal activity," Gabriella, Jackson said gravely. "Your son could go to prison for this." "Let me handle it my way first." I insisted, still unable to fully accept what was happening. "Just freeze everything for now. No changes to the will, no transfers, nothing without my in-person approval and a witnessed signature." 2 days later I was descending the grand staircase when Amanda appeared at the bottom. She looked up at me with that plastic smile. "Careful, Gabriella. These stairs can be treacherous at your age." As I reached the middle of the staircase, she suddenly rushed up as if to help me, but instead her hand pushed firmly against my lower back. I stumbled forward, tumbling down the remaining 15 steps, landing hard on the marble foyer floor. Pain exploded in my hip and wrist. Amanda's scream sounded theatrical, even through my pain. "Thomas, come quickly. Gabriella has fallen." She knelt beside me, eyes wide with mock concern as footsteps pounded toward us. But in the moment before Thomas arrived, she leaned close and whispered, "Such a shame. Elderly falls are so common." I spent 3 days in the hospital with a fractured wrist and severely bruised hip. The doctor, a young woman I'd never met before, seemed unusually eager to prescribe heavy pain medication despite my protests that acetaminophen would be sufficient. When I asked for a copy of my chart, the nurse couldn't find it. Thomas and Amanda visited briefly, bringing flowers and concerned expressions that never reached their eyes. On the 3rd day, I pretended to be asleep when they visited. Their whispered conversation confirmed my worst fears. "The doctor says she could be released tomorrow," Amanda hissed. "This didn't buy us nearly enough time." "At least we got her out of the house to make those changes to her study," Thomas replied. "And Reynolds increased her medication again. It won't be long now." After they left, I quietly checked myself out against medical advice and took a taxi to my old friend Dr. Sarah Goldstein, a physician who had treated our family for decades before retiring. She took blood samples personally and sent them to a private lab under a pseudonym. The results came back showing traces of warfarin, a blood thinner, and increased levels of my hypertension medication, nearly 3 times my prescribed dose. Long-term, the combination could cause internal bleeding or stroke. "Gabriella, someone is trying to kill you," Sarah said bluntly. "We need to call the police." "Not yet," I said. "I need more evidence." I returned home as if nothing had happened, but now I was carefully palming my medication, pretending to take it but disposing of it instead. I kept a hidden voice recorder in my pocket at all times. I backed up the security footage to a cloud server only I could access. I documented everything meticulously with Jackson's help. One evening, Thomas came to my study with an unusually cheerful demeanor. "Mom, Amanda and I have been thinking. It's been so long since we did something special as a family. We've arranged a boat trip this weekend on the Hudson. Just the 3 of us, like a small family reunion. What do you say?" My instincts screamed danger, but I smiled warmly. "That sounds wonderful, Thomas. I'd love that." As he left, I called Jackson immediately. "I need to see you tomorrow morning. Bring the paperwork we discussed. And Jackson, if anything happens to me, you know what to do." The morning of the boat trip dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring day that normally brings joy. I dressed carefully in layers, a light sweater over a moisture-wicking shirt, comfortable pants, and slip-resistant shoes. Not my usual boat attire, but I wasn't planning for a normal excursion. Before leaving, I met with Jackson in his office, handing him a sealed envelope. "If I don't contact you by 7 this evening, open this and take it directly to the district attorney. Gabriella, please reconsider. This is too dangerous." "I need to know for certain, Jackson. I need to hear it from them." The envelope contained all my evidence, blood test results, security footage, voice recordings, and a detailed account of everything that had happened. It also contained new will documents, removing Thomas as a beneficiary and leaving the bulk of my estate to a foundation for elder abuse prevention with Jackson as executor. Thomas and Amanda were waiting at the private marina, standing beside a 40-foot cabin cruiser, I recognized as belonging to one of Thomas's wealthy friends. Amanda wore a nautical-inspired outfit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, her highlighted hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail. Thomas looked relaxed in designer casual wear, sunglasses hiding his eyes. "Mom, right on time," he called with manufactured enthusiasm. "Beautiful day for a cruise, isn't it?" "Absolutely perfect." I agreed, allowing him to help me aboard. I noticed Amanda watching my movements carefully, perhaps assessing my physical condition. We headed out onto the Hudson River, the Manhattan skyline, creating a stunning backdrop. Thomas took the wheel, while Amanda gave me a tour of the boat, pointing out features I didn't care about. I accepted a glass of champagne, but only pretended to sip it, noting the strange bitter scent beneath the bubbles. To family, Thomas toasted when he joined us, raising his own untouched glass. To getting what we deserve, Amanda added with a meaningful look at Thomas. We cruised north for about an hour, making superficial conversation. I asked about their social engagements, Thomas's work at the company, Amanda's non-existent event planning business. They answered with rehearsed enthusiasm, exchanging glances when they thought I wasn't looking. The boat moved into a more secluded stretch of river, with fewer other vessels visible. Thomas cut the engine, letting us drift in a quiet cove. "Isn't this peaceful, Mom, away from the noise and stress of business?" "Very peaceful," I agreed. "Actually, I wanted to talk to both of you about business. I've noticed some irregularities in the company accounts. Large transfers to Cayman Island banks. Contracts I don't remember signing." The atmosphere on the boat changed instantly. Thomas's false smile disappeared, and Amanda's posture stiffened. "You're confused, Mom. That's all approved company business." Strange, because I spoke with the board yesterday and they had no knowledge of these transfers, and Jackson showed me the documents with my forged signature. Thomas's face darkened. You should be careful about making accusations, especially at your age. People might think you're becoming senile. Is that why you've been tampering with my medication? To make me seem confused and incapable, I pulled the recorder from my pocket. I have blood tests showing dangerous levels of warfarin in my system. Medication I'm not prescribed. Amanda stepped forward, her mask of politeness completely gone. You stupid old woman. You should have just taken your pills and drifted away peacefully. It would have been so much easier for everyone. Easier for you to steal my company. The company your father and I built from nothing while you were still in diapers. I turned to Thomas, hoping against hope to see some flicker of the sun I'd raised. Why, Thomas? We gave you everything. His face contorted with unexpected rage. You gave me nothing. You and Dad were always too busy with the precious company. Board meetings instead of my baseball games. Business trips during school plays. You built your empire and expected me to be grateful for the scraps of attention you threw my way. We worked hard to give you opportunities we never had. No, you worked hard because you loved working more than you loved me. And now I'm taking what should have been mine all along. I backed away as they both advanced toward me. I've already changed my will. You get nothing, Thomas. Not a penny. Amanda laughed a cold sound with no humor. Too late for that. We have documents showing you're mentally incompetent. After your tragic accident today, the previous will stands. Thomas inherits everything, and as his wife, I'll finally have the lifestyle I deserve. The police will investigate. The evidence. What evidence? Thomas smirked. A boating accident. Tragic but not suspicious. An elderly woman with documented confusion and balance issues falling overboard. Will be too distraught to answer questions for weeks, by which time any evidence will be long gone. They had me backed against the railing now. The voice recorder was still running in my pocket, capturing everything. Amanda stepped closer, her manicured hand reaching toward me. You know what's ironic, Gabriella? You survived so much, building a company from nothing. The tech crash of 2001, Harold's death, and now you'll be defeated by something as simple as water. Her hand shot out, shoving hard against my chest. As I began to fall backward over the railing, she leaned forward and whispered, Say hello to the river. I saw Thomas watching, a small smile playing on his lips as his own mother plummeted toward the water. No move to help, no cry of alarm, just satisfaction. The shock of the cold water momentarily paralyzed me. The weight of my clothes immediately began pulling me down. I could see the boat's motor starting, Thomas clearly visible at the wheel, already turning away. They weren't even going to pretend to look for me or call for help. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but Harold's voice seemed to echo in my mind. When you're drowning in problems, Gabby, that's when you need to be calmest. It was what he'd always told me during business crises, but it applied literally now. I forced myself to stop thrashing and conserve energy. Thankfully, the Hudson River isn't the deepest at this particular stretch. I oriented myself and began swimming parallel to the shore rather than directly toward it, letting the current help rather than fighting it. Every muscle screamed in protest, the cold sapping my strength, but I kept moving. My childhood in Hoboken suddenly proved valuable. I had spent summers swimming in this very river, knowing its currents and moods. After what seemed like an eternity, but was probably 15 minutes, my feet touched something solid, a sandbar. I rested briefly, watching the boat disappear around a bend before continuing toward the shore. I finally dragged myself onto a muddy riverbank, collapsing in exhaustion. My clothes were soaked, my body trembling uncontrollably from cold and shock. I lay there staring at the sky, allowing myself one moment of pure grief for the son I had lost more completely than if he had died. Hey lady, you all right? A gruff voice broke through my daze. An older man in fishing gear was hurrying toward me from a small dock nearby. Jesus, did you fall in? The current's mighty strong today. Boat accident, I managed through chattering teeth. The man who introduced himself as Frank helped me to his truck and cranked the heat to maximum. Hospital's 20 minutes away. You need an ambulance. I thought quickly. If I went to the local hospital, there was a chance Thomas would be notified. No ambulance. But the hospital would be good. Frank didn't recognize me, for which I was grateful. I was just an old woman who'd had an accident as far as he was concerned. At the hospital, I gave a false name, claiming I'd lost my purse in the river. The staff treated me for mild hypothermia and exhaustion, asking few questions. From my hospital bed, I watched the local news report that evening. There I was, Gabriella Wilson, billionaire CEO, reported missing after a tragic boating accident. The reporter stood at the marina, looking appropriately solemn. The search continues for Gabriella Wilson, 69, who fell from a private boat earlier today. Her son Thomas Wilson and his wife Amanda were with her at the time and immediately called the Coast Guard, but so far, no sign of Mrs. Wilson has been found. Due to the water temperature and strong currents, authorities say survival would be unlikely. The camera cut to Thomas and Amanda on the dock, her face buried in his shoulder, his expression a masterpiece of grief. "My mother was everything to me," he said, voice breaking on cue. "We're still hoping for a miracle, but we're preparing for the worst." I switched off the TV, a strange calm settling over me. They thought they'd won. They thought I was dead. And in that mistaken belief lay my greatest advantage. I spent 2 nights in the hospital under the name Jane Smith, paying cash and refusing to provide insurance information. The staff was puzzled, but not suspicious enough to investigate further. I used the hospital phone to call Jackson, arranging to meet at a small diner near his office. His face when he saw me walk in was something I'll never forget. First disbelief, then overwhelming relief. "My God, Gabriella. When I saw the news, when I didn't hear from you," he embraced me tightly, something he'd never done in 30 years of professional relationship. "They tried to kill me, Jackson. My own son pushed me into the river and left me to drown. I've already taken your evidence to the district attorney. They were skeptical, but now that you're here alive, things will move very quickly." "Not yet," I said. "I want to see how far they'll go now that they think I'm dead. I want the full measure of their betrayal before justice comes." Jackson provided me with a secure apartment in a building. His firm owned a place with no connection to me or my family. From this command center, I began monitoring the rapid dismantling of my life by the son I had raised. Within 24 hours of my death, before any body had been found, Thomas called an emergency board meeting at Wilson Tech. He presented forged documents giving him control in the event of my death or incapacity. The board, many of whom had known me for decades, were hesitant, but ultimately voted to give him temporary leadership while the situation clarified. Amanda wasted no time either. Through the security system I still had access to, I watched her enter my closet the very evening of my accident. She tried on my jewelry parading in front of the mirror in my grandmother's pearls and the diamond earrings Harold had given me for our 40th anniversary. "These will need to be reset in a more modern style," she told Thomas, who lounged on my bed drinking my finest scotch. "The stones are gorgeous, but the settings are so dated." "Take whatever you want," Thomas replied. "It's all ours now." Jackson helped me assemble a small team of trusted allies. Sarah Goldstein, my doctor friend. Maria, my loyal housekeeper who had warned me. 2 board members who had expressed doubts about Thomas's leadership and documentation. A forensic accountant who specialized in uncovering financial fraud. A private security specialist with law enforcement contacts. We worked methodically, gathering evidence of every illegal action Thomas took in the days following my disappearance. The forged documents, the unauthorized bank transfers, the manipulation of company stock. We documented it all. Meanwhile, Thomas moved into the CEO office at headquarters, hiring a new executive assistant and firing 3 senior managers who had been loyal to me. Amanda was photographed at charity events wearing my jewelry, accepting condolences with practiced grief. "Gabriella was like a mother to me," she told a society reporter. "We're still in shock." They held a memorial service at our family church 5 days after my death, though no body had been recovered. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Thomas gave a tearful eulogy about his supportive, loving mother, while Amanda dabbed at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Business associates and social connections filled the pews, but I noticed the absence of our longtime employees and real friends. That same evening, they hosted a dinner party at my home. Not a somber gathering to remember me, but a celebration thinly disguised as a support gathering. Through the security cameras, I watched 40 people eating food prepared by a new chef, drinking vintage champagne from my cellar, while Thomas raised a toast in the dining room. "To new beginnings and exciting opportunities," he said, clinking glasses with Amanda. No one seemed to find it inappropriate just hours after my memorial service. After their guests left, Thomas and Amanda retired to the master bedroom they had immediately claimed as their own. My clothes had been packed up, my personal items moved to storage. Amanda had already ordered new furniture and was discussing paint colors with a decorator she'd brought in. "I'm thinking a complete renovation," she told Thomas as they prepared for bed. "This room is so old-fashioned, like a museum." "Whatever you want, darling. The contractor can start next week." In just 5 days, they had erased nearly all traces of me from my own home. It was as if I had never existed, except as a source of wealth they now controlled. With Jackson's help, I began systematically cutting off their access. We froze accounts they didn't know about. We alerted banks to possible fraud. We changed passwords and security protocols for the company's most sensitive systems. We contacted loyal board members individually, sharing some of our evidence and securing their support for what was to come. On the 7th day after my disappearance, Thomas and Amanda hosted their largest gathering yet. They called it a business reception, but it was clearly a coming-out party for them as the new power couple in charge of Wilson Tech. The guest list included every major business figure in New Jersey and New York who might be useful to them. The champagne flowed a string quartet, played in the foyer, and caterers served expensive hors d'oeuvres on silver platters that had been wedding gifts to Harold and me. Thomas stood on the staircase, landing to address the crowd, Amanda at his side in a designer gown and my mother's diamond necklace. "Thank you all for coming during this difficult transition period. While we continue to mourn my mother's tragic accident, Wilson Tech must move forward. I'm honored to take the helm of the company my parents built, and with your support, lead it into an even more profitable future." Applause filled the foyer as Thomas raised his champagne flute. "To Wilson Tech's next chapter." That was when I entered through the front door, which Maria had left unlocked for me. Still wearing the outfit I'd assembled for my return, a simple black dress, low heels, my hair neatly styled. No grand entrance, no dramatic declaration. I simply walked in and took a seat in my favorite chair in the living room, visible to everyone on the staircase and in the foyer. The first person to notice me was a board member who choked on his champagne, drawing others' attention. A wave of shocked silence spread through the room like ripples in water. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Glass shattered as someone dropped their drink. Thomas was still speaking, unaware of the disruption, until Amanda grabbed his arm, her face draining of color. He turned, following the direction of everyone's gaze, and saw me sitting calmly in my chair. "Hello, Thomas." "Amanda. Lovely party. I'm sorry I'm late." The silence that followed my greeting seemed to stretch for an eternity. Thomas's face cycled through expressions: shock, disbelief, calculation, and finally a desperate attempt at joy. "Mom. My God. It's a miracle." He started toward me, arms outstretched as if for an embrace, but I raised my hand to stop him. "Don't bother with the performance, Thomas. Everyone here is about to learn exactly what kind of man you really are." Amanda recovered more quickly, her survival instinct kicking in. "Gabriella, we thought you were dead. Where have you been? We've been sick with worry." Several guests were already edging toward the door, sensing they had unwittingly walked into a family catastrophe. Others remained frozen in place, unwilling to miss whatever was about to unfold. "This woman is clearly not Gabriella Wilson," Amanda declared suddenly, her voice ringing through the foyer. "Look at her. This is some kind of imposter trying to create confusion during our time of grief." A murmur ran through the crowd. I stood slowly facing the gathering. "I am very much Gabriella Wilson, and I am very much alive despite the best efforts of my son and his wife to drown me in the Hudson River 7 days ago." The front door opened before anyone could respond, and Jackson entered, accompanied by 2 police detectives and the district attorney. Behind them came Maria Dr. Goldstein and the security specialist who had helped us build our case. Thomas and Amanda Wilson, one detective said, moving forward. We have some questions regarding the disappearance and attempted murder of Gabriella Wilson. This is absurd, Thomas shouted, looking around wildly. This woman appears out of nowhere with outrageous accusations and you believe her. She's clearly mentally unwell. We've been mourning her death. While wearing my jewelry and drinking my champagne, I noted calmly, some mourning. The district attorney stepped forward. Mr. Wilson, we have substantial evidence, including blood tests, showing your mother was being poisoned, security footage from this house, showing your discussions about accelerating the timeline, and most damning of all, a voice, recording from the boat where you and your wife explicitly discussed your plan before pushing Mrs. Wilson overboard. Amanda's composure cracked entirely. She's lying. There's no recording. Actually, there is, I said, retrieving the small device from my pocket, waterproof and still functioning perfectly after my unexpected swim. The detective played a short segment, and Amanda's voice filled the now silent room. Say hello to the river. The guests began leaving rapidly, now no one wanting to be associated with what was clearly becoming a criminal investigation. Thomas looked around, desperately seeing his carefully constructed new life crumbling before his eyes. Mom, please. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Amanda may have said some things, done some things, but I never wanted to hurt you. You stood and watched as she pushed me overboard, Thomas. You smiled as I fell. The police moved forward with handcuffs. Amanda suddenly lunged toward me, her face contorted with rage, but was intercepted by one of the detectives. As they were being read their rights, Thomas kept looking back at me, a mixture of hatred and pleading in his eyes. The media frenzy that followed was intense. Billionaire back from dead son and daughter-in-law arrested, screamed the headlines. News vans camped outside my gate. My phone rang constantly with interview requests. Wilson tech stock plummeted temporarily as investors processed the scandal. I held one press conference to address the situation, directly standing at a podium with Jackson beside me. I will not hide from the truth, however painful. My son and his wife attempted to murder me for financial gain. They are now facing justice through proper legal channels. Wilson Tech remains strong and will continue operations under my leadership with additional oversight from our experienced board. I ask for privacy as we move forward from this family tragedy. The preliminary hearing was scheduled quickly due to the high-profile nature of the case. I sat in the courtroom, back straight, eyes forward, as Thomas and Amanda were brought in wearing orange jumpsuits instead of designer clothes. The evidence against them was overwhelming. The recording from the boat was played in its entirety, causing gasps from the gallery as Amanda's cold words and Thomas's calculated responses were heard by all. Financial records showed they had already begun transferring company assets. Medical tests confirmed the systematic poisoning. Their separate defense attorneys looked increasingly grim as the prosecution built its case. Thomas's strategy changed halfway through the proceedings. After consultation with his lawyer, he suddenly claimed that Amanda had masterminded everything, that he had been manipulated by his domineering wife, that he had no knowledge of the poisoning, and had tried to save me after Amanda pushed me overboard. Amanda's eyes widened in disbelief at this betrayal. You liar, she screamed across the courtroom. It was your idea from the beginning. You hated your mother for years. You said she never loved you like she loved the company. They were separated and removed from the courtroom, their mutual accusations continuing until the doors closed behind them. When it came time for my victim impact statement, I approached the podium slowly, the weight of what I was about to say heavy on my shoulders. Your Honor, I stand before you not just as the victim of attempted murder, but as a mother whose heart has been broken beyond repair. The physical act of being pushed into that river pales in comparison to the knowledge that my only child, whom I loved unconditionally, wanted me dead for money. Money he would have eventually inherited anyway. I paused, gathering myself. The betrayal of family is a unique kind of pain. It destroys not just your present but recasts your past in shadow. Every memory is now questioned, every shared moment suspected. Did my son ever love me? Was it always about the money? These questions will haunt me for whatever years I have left. I looked directly at Thomas, who couldn't meet my eyes. Despite everything, I take no pleasure in seeing my son in prison. But justice must be served not just for me but for every elderly person who faces exploitation and abuse from those who should protect them. Thomas and Amanda Wilson didn't just attempt to take my life, they attempted to take my dignity, my agency, and my legacy. That is unforgivable. The verdict came quickly: guilty on all counts. Thomas was sentenced to 25 years for attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and elder abuse. Amanda received 30 years as the court determined she had been the primary instigator. They would appeal, of course, but the evidence was too solid to offer much hope. After the sentencing, I requested a private meeting with Thomas in the holding area. The guards watched from a distance as I sat across from my son for what I knew would be the last time. "Why, Thomas? We would have given you anything you asked for. You were our only child, our heart." He looked older somehow, the designer stubble he had cultivated now just an actual unkempt beard. "You and Dad were always so perfect, so successful. I could never measure up. We never asked you to be us. We just wanted you to be happy. Happiness takes money, Mom. Lots of it. And waiting for you to die naturally could have taken decades." His callousness still had the power to shock me. "I've removed you from my will completely. The company will go to a foundation for elder abuse prevention after I'm gone. You'll never see a penny of Wilson Tech money again." For the first time, real emotion crossed his face. Not remorse for what he'd done to me, but panic at losing the wealth he'd tried to kill for. "You can't do that. I'm your son, your only child." "You stopped being my son the moment you smiled as I fell into that river." I stood to leave. He called after me, begging, offering explanations, promising rehabilitation and change. I didn't look back as the guard opened the door. In that moment, I finally accepted that the son I had loved was gone, if he had ever truly existed at all. The mansion felt cavernous and empty when I returned after the trial. Every room held memories now tainted by betrayal. I wandered from the kitchen, where I'd taught Thomas to bake cookies as a child, to the library where he'd studied for college exams, trying to reconcile those memories with the man who had watched impassively as I plunged toward what should have been my death. For weeks I barely left my bedroom. Food lost its taste. Sleep came in restless bursts, punctuated by nightmares of cold water filling my lungs. The weight of what had happened pressed down on me like a physical force. Maria knocked gently on my door one morning, bringing tea she knew I wouldn't drink. "Mrs. Wilson, you have a visitor. The fisherman who helped you that day. Mr. Frank DeSanto. He saw the news and realized who you were." Curiosity overcame my isolation. Frank sat awkwardly in the formal living room, his weathered hands turning his cap nervously. He stood when I entered. "Mrs. Wilson, just wanted to check if you were okay after everything. Those vultures on TV don't tell the real story." His simple kindness, expecting nothing in return, pierced the protective numbness I'd wrapped around myself. We talked for hours, not about the betrayal or the trial, but about fishing on the Hudson, about his 40 years, working the river, about his 5 grandchildren. Normal conversation that required no performance or calculation. When he left, I felt something I hadn't expected, a small spark of connection to the world again. The next day I called Jackson. "I want to sell the mansion, and I want to create that foundation we discussed, for elderly victims of financial abuse and family betrayal." "Are you sure, Gabriella? That house has been your home for 30 years. It's just a building filled with ghosts now. I need something smaller, something that's just mine." We found a comfortable 4-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood with a garden I could tend myself and a kitchen where I could rediscover my love of cooking. I donated most of the mansion's furniture to charity, keeping only a few pieces that held happy memories untouched by recent events. The Wilson Elder Protection Foundation became my new purpose. I used my business experience to structure it effectively, focusing on education, legal support, and emergency housing for seniors escaping abusive situations. The mansion became the foundation's headquarters, its opulent rooms converted to offices, counseling spaces, and temporary apartments. Frank joined the foundation's advisory board, bringing practical wisdom and street smarts to complement the lawyers and social workers. Maria became our first outreach coordinator, using her natural empathy to connect with frightened seniors. And through them, I began building a new circle of friends and colleagues who valued me for my contributions, not my bank account. I resumed my role as CEO of Wilson Tech, but with a clearer perspective. I established a succession plan involving a team of executives rather than a single heir, ensuring no one person could ever seize control. I created transparency protocols that would have prevented Thomas's financial manipulations. 6 months after the trial, I received a call from Detective Rivera, who had investigated my case. "Mrs. Wilson, we've had 3 similar cases reported since your story went public. Elderly parents being slowly poisoned by adult children, financial documents being forged. Your willingness to speak out has encouraged others to come forward before it's too late." This knowledge gave me strength on the days when grief threatened to overwhelm me. I began speaking at conferences about elder abuse, sharing my story without shame or embarrassment. Each time it became a little easier to tell, a little more like recounting something that had happened to someone else. Through the foundation, I met dozens of men and women who had survived similar betrayals by family members. Their resilience inspired me. We formed a support group that met monthly, sharing triumphs and setbacks in our healing journeys. They became my chosen family, bound by shared experience rather than blood. 1 year after the river incident, a reporter interviewed me for a national magazine feature on elder abuse. "You've turned personal tragedy into a mission," she observed. "Do you still think about your son?" "Every day," I admitted. "Not the man who sits in prison now, but the boy I raised. The child who brought me dandelions and called them flowers. Grief and purpose can coexist. I've learned to carry both." The article generated nationwide attention and led to speaking engagements at congressional hearings on elder protection legislation. I found my voice as an advocate, channeling my pain into systemic change. 18 months into Thomas's sentence, a letter arrived from the correctional facility. I let it sit unopened on my desk for 3 days before finally slicing the envelope with trembling hands. "Dear Mom," it began. "The prison psychologist says writing this is part of my therapy, but I'm sending it because I need you to know that I understand now what I've done. Not just to you, but to myself. Amanda and I are divorced. She refuses to see me. I have no one now, which seems fitting since I threw away the one person who truly loved me. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I am sorry. Your son Thomas." I read it 3 times, searching for manipulation or calculation. Instead, I found what seemed like genuine remorse. I placed the letter in a drawer without responding. Perhaps someday I would find the words, but not yet. My healing couldn't depend on his redemption. Frank invited me fishing that weekend. As we sat quietly on his small boat lines in the water, the Hudson River stretching before us, I felt a peculiar sense of peace. The same water that had almost been my grave now offered tranquility. The sun sparkled on the surface, revealing nothing of the dark currents below, much like the family I had once believed in. "You know, Gabriella," Frank said, breaking our companionable silence, "my father used to say that fish don't remember being hooked. That's why they can be caught again and again with the same bait. But people aren't fish. We remember our wounds, and that remembering can save us." His simple wisdom brought tears to my eyes. I spent 69 years believing that wealth was the measure of success, that providing financially for Thomas was the same as giving him what he needed. I was wrong about so many things. "Not everything," Frank countered. "You built something lasting. You survived. And now, you're helping others survive too. That's not nothing. True wealth isn't in billions, but in recognizing wolves in sheep's clothing before they bite. I lost a son but found myself, and in the end, that's the fortune that matters most." The river didn't claim me that day, because I still had work to do, stories to tell, lives to touch. My journey continues one day at a time, with hard-won wisdom as my compass. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that survival itself is an act of defiance against those who tried to destroy you. If my story touched you today, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's never too late to start again. The strongest people aren't those who never fall, but those who rise after everyone expected them to stay down.